Lithuania pushes EU to launch Ukraine talks without Hungary. In a letter circulated to EU member states, Vilnius argued that Budapest cannot be allowed to block Kyiv's accession process and warned that further delays would only undermine Ukraine's reforms and strengthen Russia's hand. The proposal foresees opening technical-level talks with 26 member states and leaving the door open for Hungary to join later if it changes its position. Lithuanian officials stress that Ukraine's accession is not only a political priority but also a core part for Europe's security architecture. The plan is expected to be debated at next week's informal meeting of EU foreign ministers in Copenhagen, where Ukrainian regional security will top the agenda. The plan is expected to be debated at next week's informal meeting of EU foreign ministers in Copenhagen, where Ukrainian regional security will top the agenda. Gasoline has run short in several Russian regions after Ukrainian drones hit refineries and oil depot in recent weeks. Drivers in Crimea, the Far East and the Kuril Islands reported long lines and even rationing at gas stations. In some areas, sales were stopped completely. Fuel prices have soared, with high-octane gasoline trading about 50% higher than in January. Local media in Primorye said some drivers were trying to sell fuel online for nearly $10 per gallon. Ukraine carried out at least 12 attacks on Russian oil facilities between August 2nd and August 24th, most of them targeting refineries in the Ryazan-Volgograd corridor. Russian output of gasoline dropped by almost 9% in the first 3 weeks of August compared with last year.
What Ukrainians are doing, they are attacking an arc of refineries starting from Ryazan, which is south of Moscow, and all the way to Volgograd. That region is where people are driving through on their way to the Black Sea. That's the region where Russia has its black earth, so that's where most of harvest operations are going on. And that's also, well, rather densely populated region, so that's the center of demand.
US envoy sees chance for Ukraine peace deal this year. US Special Representative Steve Witkoff told Fox News that any decision on territory rests with Ukrainians themselves. The issue is more complicated than simply giving up land. They need to know what security guarantees exist, and they must be sure this will never happen again, he said. According to Witkoff, technical teams are already working on the details with a possible framework for a peace emerging before the end of the year. He added that the Trump administration believes Putin is willing to end the war and announced upcoming talks with the Ukrainian delegation in New York. But Russia refuses peace talks until Ukraine meets its conditions. Russia's Foreign Minister Lavrov said last week that dictator Putin will not meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky unless Ukraine first accepts several long-standing Russian demands to end the war. This include giving up NATO ambitions and making territorial and language concessions. Lavrov also accused Ukraine and its European allies of lacking genuine interest in peace, suggesting that recent diplomacy led by US President Donald Trump was being used only to isolate Russia. Despite Trump's claims of arranging a breakthrough and preparing a meeting between Putin and Zelensky, the Kremlin's insistence on preconditions makes such a summit highly unlikely. Crucially, Lavrov emphasized that Zelensky lacked the legitimacy under Ukrainian law to sign any agreement with Russia. The message is clear. Russia is not seeking peace. It is looking for excuses and alternatives to delay real negotiations.
Doesn't matter what they say. Steve can answer, but I can answer too. Doesn't matter what they say. Everybody's posturing. It's all bullshit, okay? Everybody's posturing. Steve, do you have a different answer?
I agree with you, sir.
And by the way, Vladimir Putin has been in power for more than 24 years. And every election during his rule has been marred by violations and manipulation, according to international observers. The aggressor state has never held free or fair elections. Opponents of Putin are systematically removed, often silenced, imprisoned, or even killed. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has accused Russia of deliberately stalling peace negotiations aimed at ending the war in Ukraine, describing Moscow's approach as strategy of delay. His comments were directed at the planned meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russian dictator Putin. He recalled that US President Donald Trump, after meeting Russian dictator in Alaska, and then Zelensky and other European leaders in Washington, declared that a summit between the Ukrainian president and the Russian dictator should take place within 2 weeks. That deadline expires in just a few days. Merz stressed that it is now Russia's turn to act. If the Russian side does not take this step, even greater pressure will be necessary, he said, adding that the European Union is already preparing for further sanctions. Following talks with Zelensky and European leaders on August 18, Trump announced he was preparing a meeting between Ukraine and Russia at the leadership level and suggested that a trilateral summit with his own participation could follow. Western governments have drafted a preliminary post-war security concept for Ukraine that includes 3 levels of defense, the Financial Times reports. The first would establish a demilitarized zone monitored by neutral peacekeepers from a third country approved by both Kyiv and Moscow. A second line would be held by Ukrainian forces trained and equipped by NATO states. A third tier would place European deterrence units deeper inside Ukraine, with US support provided from the rear. Officials in several European countries remain cautious about the idea of deploying soldiers on Ukrainian territory. Still, Andriy Yermak, head of Ukraine's presidential office, called the plan a significant shift compared with the spring, noting that European bridges on the ground, combined with US strategic capabilities, could form a new security guarantees. The United States can provide the backbone that makes the whole system of deterrence and security work, Yermak said. According to the Financial Times, Washington has also promised to bolster European forces with air cover and intelligence. EU moves forward with a discussion on further sanctions if Moscow continues its aggression. Germany debates role in securing post-war Ukraine. With talk of a possible peace deal intensifying, Germany is already debating how far it should go in guaranteeing Ukraine's security after the war. The key question is whether German soldiers might be deployed as part of a European mission, the New York Times reports.
A long road remains for any peace deal in Ukraine, despite weeks of furious diplomacy and optimistic predictions from President Trump. But in Germany, political leaders are already debating a crucial detail for any final agreement: whether the German army will send troops to help keep the peace.
Chancellor Friedrich Merz has signaled openness to such a step, presenting it as a part of his push for stronger German leadership in Europe. But opinions are divided. Polls show support for higher defense spending, yet few are willing to serve. The government is even considering a limited return of the military conscription to fill the ranks. Critics warn that sending troops to Ukraine would stretch the Bundeswehr beyond its limits. Officials stress that Germany's role could also involve training Ukrainian forces or providing air defense, rather than necessarily deploying soldiers. Ukraine, meanwhile, continues to demand firm guarantees from Europe and the United States. Thank you for watching us. For more interesting content about Ukraine, please subscribe.